We're now joined by Navroz Dubash, Professor, Center for Policy Research. Navroz, thanks so much for joining us. And we're talking a lot about the environment, what we're seeing around us, cleaner air, we're talking about cleaner water. And how can we maintain this is also one of the things that is being spoken about. Also, given this entire pandemic, I think it's also made us realize we need to respect nature more. So how do we maintain this? How do we build on, what we've seen during this lockdown?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on the show. Very, very good questions. So, I think the first thing to think about is how do we think about this lockdown? And there's no doubt that the first thing we have to think about is the fact that the burden has been borne by the poorest in India. And that when we think about the environment, of course, there have been some gains, but they've been at the cost of economic slowdown with hardship to many. And so that's not the kind of environmental gain that we really want to see. At the same time, our eyes have been opened by this environmental gain. And so the question we have to ask is, what can those of us, particularly those of us who have not borne the brunt of this lockdown, what can we do differently to try and carry forward some of the things we've learned? Now, I don't think that the only way going forward is that we actually have no choice but to shut down economic activity to have environmental gains. That's not the lesson we should take. There are many things that we could do. So let me just name maybe a couple of them. And you can tell me whether I should pause and if you want to ask questions about these. So the first thing, as I think Dr. Trehan has said, is that many of us, and particularly the elite among us, have been forced into this giant experiment with working at home, with doing more Skype calls and Zoom calls. A lot of business is being transacted online. This is a giant experiment, and so far, my indications suggest that it's actually working reasonably well. A lot of superfluous trips could be cut down by air, by road, and so on. Work from home is becoming more and more popular, and companies are seeing that it actually costs them less in terms of rental costs, even with high productivity. So we can actually, at one fell swoop, decrease air travel by a substantial chunk, as well as we can decrease congestion on our roads.
Okay, Navroz,
that's the first thing that we could try carrying forward, going out.
Navroz, I must ask you, what in your mind in the last few weeks has been, for you, the single biggest environmental gain that you have seen during this lockdown period?
Well, the single biggest gain that we have experienced visibly and in terms of our sensory perceptions is definitely air pollution, right? So air quality, I've just looked up some numbers. We're talking about 40–50% improvements in PM 2.5, which is the main pollutant to watch out for. While the average at this time of year is about 100, 120, averages are closer to 35 and 40 and 50 PM 2.5. We have many more satisfactory air days that we've had. It's actually quite extraordinary. And it teaches us something about where these pollutants are coming from. Now, as I said, some of these pollutants are coming from things that we will need soon. Industrial emissions, there's been a decline in power plants and so on. But there are things we can do about that. Can I just pick up on the power plant point, if I might?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so what's interesting about the power plant story is that the power sector is going through quite a crisis because our power demand has gone down. And so power generation companies are losing money, they're not getting paid, and so on. This is actually a great opportunity to more quickly move away and close down old power plants, something that the government actually asked for in the last budget. Because if you close down old and polluting power plants, the new and cleaner power plants and renewable energy plants get a chance to make some money because they're the ones that we use. So they get used at higher proportions and they make more money. So it's good for the economy, it's good for the environment, and it's good for the COVID startup, the post-lockdown economic startup post-COVID. So this is the kind of thing we have to look for, where there are environmental gains and where there are economic gains, and particularly gains to the poorest.
Mr. Navroz, I just wanted to ask that we all are thinking about cleaner fuel, and there's this talk about hybrid cars, e-cycles, hydrogen fuel cell, electric buses. How can we progress in that direction?
So look, one of the things around the world that's being discussed is as stimulus programs are being developed to jumpstart economies, our stimulus program is relatively much smaller than in many other countries, which are running into trillions of dollars in the EU and other places. How can those monies be put towards green technologies and jumpstarting green industries that can generate jobs? I think that's an important question, and we should be thinking about it. But I think in India also, we have to work on at least two tracks. So one is moving towards e-buses and electric vehicles and so on. But I think more urgently in the short run, India has to move towards better and improved public transport. We need to actually get people more used to public transport. And by that, I don't mean people who are on public transport more now. Ideally, I mean you and me also on public transport and the elite of the city. We need to build public transport systems that people are pleased to use and are comfortable to use. And that also are comfortable in that they give you space and distance, and therefore don't expose you to health risks. So I think investing in public transport, at least simultaneously, and I would even argue before thinking about electric vehicles, is probably really important.
All right. Thank you so much, Navroz, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on what needs to be done and where the authorities need to put their attention when it comes to a cleaner future. Thank you for being with us.